Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. My name is Humble, and this time around I want to go over what it costs to build the Blunicorn, how much everything was, including the kits, what I added to it, and what our final build tally was, as well as some things that you might not have been privy to, or things that you might not consider when building a kit car of your own. So let's get into it. All right, so now really is what everyone's waiting for. We've put the car together, we've been driving it around, so really, what did it cost? This is honestly one of the hardest questions to get answered when you talk to various builders, not just the Ultima, but of any kit car really. And I don't know why that is. There is, I guess, a stigma, you might say, around declaring how much it costs to build a kit car. It doesn't matter if it's an Ultima or a GTM or SLC or even a Lotus 7 copy, something like that. There's always a stigma around the price. And I don't know if that's because there's maybe like a sense of guilt or shame from the builder that it costs too much, or that when you do finally say the price, the person who's asking might devalue the car you built. And maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. So what I've done here is I've put together what it cost for my car and my kit, and where along the way I had to pay these costs. So first and foremost, I went for Ultima Evolution spec. The Evolution spec had been out for a couple of years prior to me ordering mine, maybe even a year and a half. And I knew I wanted the best of the best of the best, with a couple of exceptions. There's two options in the kit that I felt that I didn't need. The first was there's an option for a leather-wrapped roll cage. I knew that I would be tracking my car. It wasn't a luxury build, and that leather wrap would get in the way of other things, safety, head protection, things like that that are mandated if I want to take the car racing. So that was out. And the second thing was there's a lumbar pillow. It's a pneumatic lumbar pillow that goes into the seat. And I opted not to put that into my seats. Were I to build it again, I may add those. The seats themselves are fairly comfortable, even on longer road trips. I find that the seats are fine. It's actually my heels and part of my seating position that really cause fatigue or pain. So the seats themselves don't really need the lumbar pillows, but I can see if you're doing a longer road trip, you might want to use those. So now on to the base price of the complete kit. If you request a kit price from Ultima, they'll send you a list of parts or kits. I think now they've even trimmed down the number of kits to build a complete car, but there's more in each kit. So on my car, I basically got everything except for the two items stated before, the lumbar pillow and the leather wrapped roll cage. Otherwise, I ticked every box that I could. And the total for the kit from Ultima, let me check my notes here, was $69,632. That's for the kit as purchased from Ultima. Now, when you order your kit, Ultima requires that you put 25% down the day that you put in your order. So for me, that 25% was $17,408. The order goes in, and now the waiting game begins. I put my order in, I want to say late October or early November of 2016, if I remember right. Yeah, it had to be November, October or November of 2016 is when I ordered my car. Fast forward until I want to say April, a little before that, my kit was finally ready to ship. And when they complete your kit, that's when your last 75% of the price is due. When the last 75% of the bill comes due, which in my case was $52,224, what the factory will do is they'll take your money, they take your kit and everything for that you've ordered from the factory, from the Ultima factory, they crate it up, and it goes onto a shipping vessel. And depending on your location in the US, it can take 2 to 3 months for that to arrive. That is probably one of the worst parts of the build, because there are big swaths of time where the boat is out of reach of any shore and you just don't know where it is. And it's nothing but anticipation and impatience while you wait to have your kit arrive at your door. Now, for that part of the trip, it is now out of Ultima's hands, and it's usually handled by a freight courier. For my freight courier, what they do is while the car is in transit, but before it arrives on, in this case, on the California shore, they make sure that you have all of your documents in order. And that's part of the service they provide, is they make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, and at least for North America, for the US, there will be import duties, fees, and taxes associated with importing a car from Europe. One of the things they cover is they'll offer to pay that in your stead, so they don't need to wait on your approval for a check or anything like that. And that's that may differ service to service. The one I had gone through offered to do that for me, and I just kind of wrote them a check for their complete services. So it was they paid the import duties and taxes once they had that total for me. They covered the last mile delivery, which is basically from the shipping dock to my house. Normally, a freight service will only deliver to the port of entry. So in my case, that was the port of Oakland, because I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. So the car arrived at the port of Oakland, and they covered getting the car through customs, paying all my taxes, the import duty and tariffs that I had to pay. And then once the car was ready, they scheduled a driver for pickup and delivery, and they delivered the crates. You've already seen in the first build video, it was a big crate, a car-sized crate, and then a smaller one about half the size of a car, and that's what will arrive at your doorstep. So all in all, and I should say, for at least in my experience, and for my freight, import duty, taxes, and last mile delivery service, those fees totaled up to $6,561. And I'll mention that because that was not a cost that I was expecting. I didn't know I would have to pay any of that. Call it naivety or whatever. It's just not something that I had considered. Ultima does state that, shipping is free, and to a point it is when you ordered a complete kit. But that doesn't include the import taxes, duty fees, and tariffs that you'll need to pay when importing a car. Now, I also chose to buy my transmission from Ultima. I was, super patient with my build. Ultima had taken the body for the Blunicorn to a trade show and decided to show it off, and I let them do it because it was a nice, beautiful, bright blue color, and it was in great contrast to the other cars that were there. And in return, they had given me kind of first right of refusal for a transmission they'd come across. And so I decided to pick up the Porsche G9650 turbo transmission from Ultima as well. And so the transmission also came via freight, also had to go through import duties, tariffs, etc. And I also had to pay a use tax for it when it arrived. So the the transmission was $18,786, and the import fees for that transmission were an additional $545. So you can see how these import fees start to pile up, but thankfully that was it. That was the last of it, because everything else I was able to source domestically. Can you get the Ultima kit cheaper? Yes, I totally believe so. Could I use a cheaper transmission? Yes, I could. It's possible to get a G9601 or G9603, which is what you might find in a normal Carrera or even a Carrera S, and without a limited slip differential. However, it doesn't. Those transmissions won't hold up to the torque that an LS7 or even a modified LS7 engine will output. You pretty much shred the gears in short order. So I knew the transmission for a turbo car was much stronger, and the gearing was laid out for a car that makes a bunch of torque, and that's what I decided would fit the car best and was a simple one purchase solution. A couple things that I had upgraded from the base kit. Now, when I ordered my kit, the standard radiator that came with the kit was a heavy brass unit, which, as far as I know, I don't think Ultima supply anymore. Now the lighter aluminum radiator is what they offer as standard. I didn't know that was the, for at least when I ordered my kit, I didn't know that the brass radiator was the standard option. So when I got it, it was incredibly heavy, and I wanted the lighter weight aluminum radiator. So I went with a custom CNR radiator with two higher output fans to put in the front of the car. That additional purchase was another, $1,320? So tack that on to the top of the build. In fact, I still have the brass radiator ready to give to another builder or for somebody else to use if they need it. I'm just holding on to it. The other thing that I upgraded, and I've talked about this before, is the fuel cells versus gas tanks. The stock Ultima fuel tank is just empty sheet metal that's been welded up, and it's perfectly acceptable. However, it's not crash proof. There's no real crash protection. and it's very easy for that aluminum tank to rupture in the event of an accident or something like that. So I had upgraded to fuel-safe fuel cells with integrated Holley hydromat pickups, and those fuel cells were, again, an additional $5,311 on top of what I paid for the rest of the build. Finally, we're coming down to kind of the last of the nitty gritty. So we have the whole car, we have a couple things that I upgraded, we have the engine and transmission now. Other things that I added on top of the kit that you receive from Ultima were things like sound deadening, additional motorsport sensors. I added a different set of springs than it shipped with from the factory that are stiffer and more aimed at motorsport or track use. I added heat shielding across the car to kind of keep the heat at bay, both in the front and in the rear of the car. That made quite a big difference, actually, in the cabin temperature, a lot more than I thought it would, and that was really helpful. And then the last thing I added was safety items. So I added a fire extinguisher, I added a battery cutoff, and I wanted to make sure that if I'm going to have the car out on track, that I have the necessary safety items to, in the event that anything bad happened. And it turns out that some of those came in pretty handy. All right, so the additional safety items, sound deadening, heat shielding, and motorsport sensors ended up adding about another $8,000 or so on top of everything else that I had purchased for the car. So that brings our grand total up to $139,496. That's what it cost for my build. Included in that cost is what I had to pay when I went to the DMV and registered the car. When you buy a kit car or you build a kit car, the very first time it gets registered, you have to pay that new car tax. And in the state of California, that's about 10% or so, depending on the city in which you live. And so on top of just the build cost for everything, also in the state of California, they want you to tally how many hours it took to build the car, and then they associate a value for those hours. So in the case of the Ultima, Ultima suggests that it takes 300 to 350 hours to put the car together. I would estimate that we built it in about 300 hours. And I went with a shop rate of $100 an hour, which seems to be par for the course in the Bay Area. So what that means is, on top of the build cost for the car, I had to add another $30,000 of labor to build the car. Now, some people say that's not fair, that it's taxing your hours, that if it's a hobby or you put the car together, that there's no real cost associated for that time and that I shouldn't have to pay taxes on it. But the flip side of that is, if your car ever needs repair, if you're ever in an accident, they have to associate a value with the time it takes to build and or repair those components. And so in the future, should anything happen, now you have a set cost for those build hours and roughly the assembly time for the car or for a specific component. And like it or hate it, having a value on something, in the case that anything bad happens, is good to have, because you can be compensated for that time or for that money. So, I don't necessarily agree with it, but having paid it, and now if anything happens, I could be compensated for my time, for the build, and for all the effort that we put into the car. So I guess I'll accept it for now, but that nearly, right around $14,541 is a pretty stiff bill to register a car. So just be prepared when you put this much into a car, put this much into a build, and you go to register it that first time. At least in the state of California, they're going to take their pound of flesh out of you. When I built my car, I built the best that I could build because it was a dream of mine. I didn't want to skimp on any facet of it. I wanted to put the best components, all the best pieces. I intended to race it at a track, so safety was important. And so that's why my car cost quite a bit more than maybe other builds that you've seen. It doesn't have to be that way. You can put an LS3 or an LS1 engine in there. You can build your own from a junkyard for quite a bit cheaper than I paid for mine. For a transmission, you can use a Boxster transmission or a Cayman transmission. You can use a G96 or a G97 cable shift transmission. It doesn't have to have a limited slip or any of those things. And you can get those transmissions much cheaper and use them just fine as long as your power plant isn't maximum power. It's, something more modest even. Places that I probably wouldn't skimp is probably sound deadening or safety. Those items aren't super expensive, but they do pay dividends in the long run, especially sound deadening. Just for ride comfort, noise comfort, NVH. Sounds kind of ridiculous when you're driving around a race car, but every little bit counts, especially if you're driving back and forth to the track or just trying to go on a longer cruise. Any little bit of noise you can get out of the cabin does make a difference. So all told, if you factor in my hours for the build and all the taxes I've paid, all of my out-of-pocket, the grand total is right around $155,000. If you don't factor in the additional, $30,000 for build hours or whatever, it's quite a bit cheaper. So I guess as a final note, I just wanted to come clean on what my build cost. Things that you could watch for when you build a kit, especially if you're building a kit that's imported from the UK or imported from out of the country. You're going to find additional build costs there that you wouldn't come across if, say, you were building an SLC or a GTM, which originate here in the States. That being said, do I think I got what I paid for? And I would say yes, and then some. From the other kits that I've seen, SLC, GTM, etc., the build quality from Ultima is bar none. The gel coat, the body comes ready to mount. Like you just have to maybe polish it a little bit. You don't have to paint it. One of the options that you can get from the factory is to have them pre-fit your body and chassis together. So all the door jambs are perfect. All the shut lines are perfect. The front clamshell and the rear clamshell meet perfectly with the body. That's not offered really by anybody else. And their bodies require a lot more work to get those perfect shut lines, to even get the perfect shapes. The fit and finish, the paneling, the chassis, the parts, it's a no-donor car. At least my build is a no donor car. I purchased everything new that could have been sourced from another car. And so it was a, new as new could be build. And I do think I got what I paid for. Would I build it again? In a heartbeat, I think. I think one of the most common questions you might ask an Ultima owner is, would you build another one? Ask any builder, would you build another one? And I think almost unanimously, everyone would say yes. Now, is that because they think they could do better the next time around, or because the build process was so enjoyable? Maybe a little bit of both, actually. I know that I love my car. I've helped with a few others now, and I would absolutely build another car from scratch. And I'm hoping I can convince someone else to build one, just so I can help. So I think that'll wrap it up. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them down in the comments below. I'll try to answer them as they come up. I know that 155 grand is nothing to sneeze at. That's a house in a fair bit of the country. So it seems like a big daunting number. Realistically, I think it is possible to build one of these cars for less than 100,000. It'll be kind of a stripped down, bare bones version, but I think you could have it for sure. And even for that money, you would still have a killer car with a very high performance envelope. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them down below. I'll answer them as they come up. And if you're thinking about building an Ultima or ordering an Ultima, go ahead and put those questions down below, and I'll see if I can help you out with any questions you might have. Thanks for watching, you guys, and I think next time around, this video went a little bit longer than I hoped it would, but next time around, I'm going to talk about the registration process, kind of what it takes to get a kit car registered in California, and kind of my experience with doing that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.